I'm going to give you a quick rundown first on why we're doing Urban Warrior, what we're hoping to accomplish, and then I'll go through the venues that we're looking at using for experimentation. The the overall question that we are trying to answer in the urban warfare experimentation is basically, I think, best articulated in Mark Bowden's book, which will be coming out here in March, Black Hawk Down. In that book, Bowden asks a question. It concerns the Task Force Ranger battle between the Somalis and Task Force Ranger on the 3rd of October, 1993. And he explores that battle in detail and asks this question: how is it that a nation that could land an unmanned little go-kart on the surface of Mars couldn't steer a convoy of 5 blocks through the streets of Mogadishu? The problems that they ran into are listed up there. Command and control in urban terrain. That includes the ability to communicate in and around buildings and so forth. Problems of mobility and counter-mobility in rubbled areas and so forth. Measured firepower, trying to fight in and amongst situations where you have people who are deliberately using civilians and non-combatants as shields. Survivability, the ability to do force protection and keep your troops operating in a very, very dangerous environment to include snipers. Adaptability, the ability to ratchet up from peacekeeping and humanitarian type operations on one block to another block where you may be doing full-scale combat. Mentally, that's a very tough challenge to overcome, and we're going to take a look at that. And finally, overall situational awareness, answering those 3 key questions: where am I, where are my buddies, and where is the enemy? Those are questions as old as the hills in military operations, but they remain particularly troublesome and challenging in the urban environment. What are we going to do with the experimental results from Urban Warrior? The Marine Corps is on the dot to the Department of Defense and to the Joint Staff to provide the draft of a document there on the right, which will be the joint approach to MOUT in the 21st century. What we have on the left is what the Marine Corps knows, our corporate knowledge on urban operations today, which is, we think, a good document, but it's based on the results of Hue City, Stalingrad, and World War II. The kinds of combat that we've seen since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and not just combat, the kinds of operations we've seen, that over 80% of the Marine Corps' operations since that time have been in some kind of urban environment. Not all warfighting, but certainly spanning the range from humanitarian operations all the way on up to fairly heavy combat operations. So we are going to take the results of Urban Warrior and hand it to our doctrine writers and so forth. If we've got some good ideas that have come out of the experimentation that they can use, that'll be a real plus that comes from the experimentation. I'll talk now a little bit about how we're going to go about this. We are now entering the second phase of Urban Warrior. We conducted most of the first phase on the East Coast, and it ranged the gamut from tactical exercises without troops in Chicago and Jacksonville, Florida, to limited experiments in New York City, down to combat operations in the industrial area of Camp Lejeune and operations in Charleston, South Carolina. Next. This time we're going to the West Coast, basically in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're going to start down there to the south of the green box in Monterey, where we'll be doing the initial operations, and then we'll be moving all the way up the coast, and I'll talk to each one of those in detail. The Monterey experiment held on 12 and 13 March. We're going to take a look at the common tactical picture, trying to have our ships at sea monitor what our Marines are doing ashore, and allow everybody in the operation hopefully to be seeing the same kind of picture and have the kind of situational awareness that Bowden talks about us lacking in Mogadishu. We're looking at tactics, techniques, and procedures for more discrete use of fire in urban areas where you might have civilians operating and so forth. And we're looking at commercial off-the-shelf use of communications equipment, things that we can give to our Marines that are lighter than the heavy, non-environmentally friendly batteries that we use today and so forth. We'd like to have something a little bit more that looks a little bit more like this, that our Marines can carry, that are reliable, et cetera, et cetera. And nice thing about this, if you fall off the deck of the ship, you won't go immediately to the bottom of the bay, at least if you can swim. And we're also looking at integrating with the Monterey Police and Fire Department. We've done a lot of work in consequence management and disaster relief and so forth, and we have promised to share the knowledge that we've acquired throughout our operations in that area. We're going to be looking at taking down a potential biological warfare lab, and we're going to be exercising our Marine Chemical Biological Incident Force in conjunction with our experimental special purpose MAGTF. Next one. I talked about situational awareness. We have a new system that we're looking at that's a generation ahead of our command and control system. It's called IMAX, Integrated Marine Multi-Agent Command and Control System. It looks to essentially put cell phones in the sky and bounce your communications from over the horizon, keeping our ships out of sight of the land. But the interesting thing about what this thing does and what it really may give us in the future is these agents are essentially self-aware. When we talk about agents, there are things embedded in that system that will look for specific things that you want to know. A little bit like the Star Trek thing where you ask a computer a question and it will not only answer the question, it will make suggestions for you. There's a lot of applications for mission planning and future operations, the ability to make your command post smaller by eliminating some of the people that do just specialized work by allowing the system to do it. It's a jump ahead of where we are right now, and we're going to try to actually do this in an operational environment. Next one. We've taken a lot of look at humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. Quite frankly, that and peace enforcement is what has peacekeeping and peace enforcement is generally what gets us involved in these situations to begin with. We've got a lot of knowledge. We've put together a compilation of lessons learned in this new experimental file. What we really want to do with this, if it works out well in the experimentation, is have a conference after the exercise and turn this into a manual that can be used joint and interagency and also by the non-governmental relief organizations, so we all are speaking on the same sheet of music and speaking the same language. We're going to also, when we leave Monterey, run a group of light armored vehicles up the coast and another experiment to try to track the common tactical picture and take a look at some of the command and control challenges associated with this over-the-horizon command and control situation with the unit moving on the ground and the ship at sea. We're also very interested in increasing our ability to do reconnaissance and surveillance with more survivable assets. One of the things that we've found in our urban experiments and our urban operational experience is that our Marine reconnaissance team, dressed in green, stands out pretty easily in an urban environment. So we're looking at using other assets to be able to tie our reconnaissance and our fires assets together more efficiently than we have in the past. One of the things we're really looking at both is robotics, both unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned ground vehicles. Little guy up at the top there is called Sarge. He's our surrogate for the kind of RISTA asset that we want on the ground. Eventually, we want something a lot smaller than Sarge, maybe that looks like a brick or a piece of rubble, but can do the same things that he can as far as acquiring targets and giving you intelligence information. And he's a good guy to get us started in that type of operation. In your information packet, you'll see about a little over 50 technologies that we've been looking at. Those are some of them there. But the bottom line is we're taking a look at the technological side as well as the tactics, techniques, and procedures side to see if we can leverage technology to help us do things a little bit better in the future. Next slide. I mentioned the problem of urban navigation and communications. We've got some good ideas about how we think we can do it better. We're going to be in the Embarcadero Business District taking a look at whether or not those things work as well in practice as they have in theory in some of our limited experiments. One other thing I will mention, although I don't have a slide on it. I talked about COTS radios and trying to put things like this together offline, but as part of our overall West Coast efforts on the 15th of March up at Stanford, we're going to have what we're calling a commercial off-the-shelf war game. We're going to bring some of the CEOs from Silicon Valley and put them together with our general officers that work these type of problems, and we're going to try to compare notes and see if we can get some ideas from them as to how to do business better in this world of commercial off-the-shelf that the Department of Defense is really admittedly just getting into and so forth. We think we got a lot to learn from those folks, and they're going to help us try to think through the problem. Next one. Oak Knoll. Oak Knoll over on Oakland on the east side of the bay is where we're going to be doing General Krulak's 3-block war. We'll be taking a look at some emerging and new tactics, techniques, and procedures for fighting in the urban environment and doing other operations. And at one time or another, the Marines in that battalion will be doing humanitarian peace operations and then full-scale combat in the old abandoned hospital up there, and taking a look at some very, very new and interesting tactics, techniques, and procedures that the battalion commander has been experimenting with. We find if we give the troops a little Kenwood-style radio right down to the fire team level and a GPS-type situation, that they start doing things a lot differently. The squad will spread out. They don't have to see the hand and arm signals or hear the yelling and screaming from the squad leader. And the battalion commander has been developing a new set of tactics to try to take advantage of that. And we're going to use this experiment to see how well that works and if we need to organize better to take advantage of that sort of thing. So it'll be an interesting experiment for us. Just some of the other things that we're going to be doing, but one of the other things that we're taking a look at is how do you resupply your forces when you get them out decentralized, a little bit less bunched up and so forth. One of the big problems that both the Russians saw in Grozny and Chechnya and that we saw in Somalia was helicopter relief supply helicopters become a real target. And then when the helicopter goes down, then you've got a new set of problems. So we're going to try to solve some of that. And again, we are looking at doing things differently. We're looking at although right now, near term, we're looking at the little squad radios and off-the-shelf GPS. We're trying to figure out a way to take that picture of a computer that this Marine's carrying around to send signals back to his headquarters and turn it into a much smaller thing. But this is a surrogate for the kinds of things we want to do to increase our situational awareness. Next slide. The commander will be talking to the Navy side of this, but I do want to point out that the Navy is heavily involved with us in Fleet Battle Experiment Echo. We at the Warfighting Lab are setting up the experiments and writing the hypothesis and sending in our analysts, but basically the commander of Commanding General of 1st Marine Amphibious or Expeditionary Force will be the officer conducting the experiment. They're his troops participating, and the seaward side of that will be the commander of 7th Fleet, or 3rd Fleet, I'm sorry. We will, at the end of the experiment, bring our ships in. We're only going to have about 500 troops on the ground at any one time. There are a lot more sailors and Marines out at sea while we're doing the experiment, but we'll bring them in, give them some liberty in the San Francisco Bay Area, and to say thank you for the help that the cities of Oakland and Alameda have given us. We're going to be doing an exposition there, show them some of the things that we're doing. Give the folks in that area a chance to meet the young sailors and Marines and get to know them. And we're going to be opening up the USS Hornet Museum. We'll have the Marine Corps Battle Color Detachment there, a couple of shows daily, San Diego Navy Band. We'll have some equipment demonstrations, ships tours of several of the ships, and finally a static display of Marine Corps and Navy equipment in Jack London Square. So hopefully it'll be a good time for everybody. That's a quick run through of Urban Warrior. It's a new type of looking at things, a new way of looking at the way we do exercises. We've learned, I think, almost as much about operating in the urban environment and setting up the experiment as we will in actually conducting it. And that we found out that joint interagency piece, as we did know going into this thing, is really important. And hopefully we've got some skills in doing that sort of thing that we didn't have before. Questions? Yes, sir.
What do you anticipate in this kind of environment from the standpoint of things like signals intelligence, that sort of stuff, which in the battlefield is a major capability? What about this type of environment? Do you see that still being valuable? Will there be some new problems or what?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're doing is as we test this new command and control equipment, we brought in a pretty diverse and capable red team to take a look at the other side of this, how the enemy might exploit this, or if he can break into it, or what we need to do to further harden our equipment. But I think we're also going to learn about some of the limitations of gathering this sort of information in the urban environment. We're red teaming for that reason, but also we are required now to red team all of our command and control systems and so forth, and so we're going to be able to kill two birds, I think, with one stone.
What air ops are you planning in conjunction with this? You listed as your static display Harriers and others. Are you going to be using fixed and rotary wing aircraft in any part of this?
We will be using some in the some of the areas that are still military controlled and so forth. It's very difficult to use fixed wing aircraft in urban areas. As you know, sometimes we use civilian small light craft as surrogates in some of our experimentation. But those things that we can't do, and we got some systems that are simulator systems and that help us do it. We've built a facility at Yuma, and we're going to run some of the problems that we can't run in the Oakland Alameda area in June out in a little area that we've specifically built for urban cast to take a look at some of these more discrete bombs that'll take out a room, vice an entire city block and things like that.
Your ground combat unit, I guess, is from 1-5, and you switch from the west coast to the east coast to the west coast. So how much time has these guys had to train up, and what have you been doing?
They've basically been at it since November. It's a challenge for the commander too, because as you know, everybody's got a job in the Marine Corps. There aren't any extra units. We have the experimental unit, the command element. It's only about 40 people. That does experimentation for us all the time. But 1-5 is going to be the ground combat element for the 31st MU in Okinawa shortly after they leave here. But Pat Garrett, the battalion commander, has done just a superb job. He's developing these new tactics and techniques and equipment, and still training his guys to go out and take a TAC test very shortly after that. So my hat's off to him. He's done a tremendous job.
So You settled the urban warrior training on top of their preparation for their regular MEU rotation?
He's been doing both. But the good thing about it, I think, is that, you know, there'll be some residual stay-behind equipment and so forth that hopefully he'll be able to exploit to in his operations out there. And he's so enthusiastic. I think we'll probably give him, you know, try to send some money and some analysts out to let him do some work out there at Camp Hansen.
You talked about the red team for C4I. Were you going to opt for of any kind? You're going to be up against, and I understand you're recruiting actors to play some roles in.
Right. There are three sides to that. The red team for the command and control is basically specialists from the radio battalions from NSA. We've contracted out to do some stuff. The reservists from the infantry regiment out there, the 23rd Marines, are providing us our military op for. And we are hiring some role players. Those role players are basically designed to simulate the kind of crowd interplay that you get, everything from reporters, which we'll have some real ones out there anyway, but hopefully I don't know, but you know, aid workers, NGOs, people that are trying to give you humanitarian information, some people that you're not sure what they're doing. And what we want to do is, Marines don't do that particularly well. They're, you know, they're still Marines. They think like Marines. We want to hire the role players and try to get them into a mindset of this is what you're doing, and try to get them to live the part. So if these new techniques that we're talking about will increase our ability to deal with these folks, we've got a very as realistic an environment as we can make it for them.
You're going to do most of this in daylight because of the problems with disturbing the folks, or any night ops?
Yeah, most of it will be simply because we do have to be considerate of the fact that particularly Oak Knoll is a suburban area. We're not going to be all that loud to begin with, but we are taking some some precautions to make sure we don't. We make a minimum impact on the local folks in Oakland and Alameda have bent over backwards to help us in this thing, and we don't want to be bad guests.
It is mostly day ops.
Sure.
Mostly day ops.
Mostly day ops, right.
Is there a common thread throughout the whole exercise? You mentioned defeating the biolab, a suspected biolab. Is that carried throughout?
The general scenario, there is a general scenario that we will be playing within. This experiment is part of an exercise that's going on throughout the West Coast. It's the part that we're playing in is we are going into essentially I would say somewhat of a kludge between the initial Beirut scenario and the Somalia scenario. In this case, we're going in to help a friendly country that's got some internal problems that are happening, and also has had a natural disaster which has exacerbated the problem. The bio piece is a piece of the overall scenario. The bottom line of the thing is what we're going to do is try to play the whole range of challenges that we've seen in this 3-block war situation someplace in the course of that week or so of experimentation. Sir, any other questions? I'll turn it over to the good commander, and he can talk a little bit about the Navy side of this thing.
All right. Let's see, the secretary spilled his glass of water. I'll drink mine. My name is Commander Bruce Nichols. I'm from the Maritime Battle Center. Maritime Battle Center is a newly created command which is part of the Naval Warfare Development Command, subordinate to the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. And what we're doing is we're kind of trading on some of the experience and the history of the Naval War College, particularly during the interwar period, where you had minds like Spruance, Nimitz, Halsey, who looked out to the future and conceptualized what the new warfare would be, what the new threats would be, and then war gamed and modeled so that they could get to a point that they were prepared to fight these new wars. And that's what we're doing. We're experimenting and innovating both in technology and in operational concept to get to a point where we are prepared for the future threats and the future war that we may have to fight, hopefully not fight. In this, we've taken some industry standards, the build, test, build standard, and we're using kind of an integrate, test, integrate synthesis, or a conceptualize, test, conceptualize synthesis in order to take the warfare that we will practice in one experiment and evolve it further down the line. Fleet Battle Experiment Echo is the fifth of a series of CNO-sponsored experiments, and we've conducted previous experiments around the globe. The last was in 7th Fleet with the U.S. Army and 7th Fleet in Korea. That was very successful. We got a lot of good mileage out of that and a lot of good concept out of that. And we're leveraging the U.S. Marine Corps and Navy team to now work Echo in and around the San Francisco area with some limited objective experiments that will occur in Southern California as well. The overarching theme or overarching concept of the warfare that we're looking towards is network-centric warfare, and it's a style of warfare that employs information superiority to increase the speed of response, the precision of the engagement, and the overall awareness of the battle space. So what we would like to do with the basic pillars of the exercise is to go into the literal, which is where we see the threat now. 80% of the world's population lives in the coastal regions. And as the good colonel pointed out, these are the areas where most of our problems have been occurring, and this is where we've had to go to fight. And so we want to be better prepared to send our sailors, Marines, soldiers, and airmen into harm's way. And through this, we're really looking at the synergy of sensors, shooters, and targets, and being able to pair all this, not just in the Navy Marine Corps team, but in a joint team as well, to operate with the Army and the Air Force, Coast Guard, and civilian agencies, as you'll see when we speak later, to give an overall common tactical picture, common operational picture. Now, one of the things that we've done is to use this as a stepping stone to the future. Common sense application of technology. Rather than just taking, everything that's out there, we want to be able to really pick and choose those best things that will allow us to get the job done. And in that, we've found that it's not always just the Navy line of acquisition that's best, but commercial off the shelf. We're bringing Air Force's J-Stars in to operate. We're using Army radios, NTDR radios as well. And so there really is an attempt here to use the whole service as a powerful enabler to conduct warfare in the future, to get rid of the parochialism and do warfare so that we can really further our mission. The specific pillars of ECHO are asymmetric threat, asymmetric warfare, and we see this all the time, that essentially in the unconventional versus conventional forces, that we are no longer facing an adversary such as the Soviet Union, but more of the Adids of the world, the the terrorists, those who will come at us from a different angle and not try to take us on where our strengths lie, but rather to try to exploit our weaknesses. And so we want to prepare for that, and that is a key theme throughout our experiment, is countering the asymmetric threat. We see drug runners who are using jet skis to transport drugs up and down the coast of California. And we see those all the time in an urban environment, and it would be very simple for somebody to use that and camouflage that in with the rest of traffic in an urban environment and to attempt to strike against our forces. So in providing force protection, in being able to conduct sustainment for forces ashore, and to have a full knowledge of the battle space, we've got to be able to go into a literal environment and counter these threats. Fast boats, low, slow flyers, cruise missiles launched from something other than a common or expected source, the back of a truck. We also are looking very heavily at the theater, at ballistic missile defense as we can. I mean, there are some obvious limitations there, but we're going to pursue that. Along with asymmetric threat, we have precision engagement, another key theme, pillar of the experiment. And what we're looking at precisely is to be able to conduct fire in an urban environment to strike and restrike targets, revisit targets, and minimize collateral damage. We want speed of response so that if somebody calls for a strike, we can get there as quickly as possible, and we want to present as little possible threat to the innocents in the area as is possible. And so that's our precision engagement piece. And lastly, our third pillar is going to be submarine warfare. We've seen the explosion literally around the world, the development of diesel-electric submarines. When you look at diesel-electric submarines in the literal environment, they're very difficult to find. They hide in the commercial shipping. There's a lot of noise in the environment, and we would like to be able to, using a net-centric basis, using distributed and collaborative planning, to optimize our sensors and to optimize our search. Also, to better employ our own submarines as part of this force protection piece and to hunt submarines in the littoral area. Adjunct experiment areas are littoral air defense, air and missile defense, information superiority, and casualty management, civilian military operations. Just to talk briefly about some of the participants, you'll see in your handout that we have a slice boat, which is a new technology. It's a swath hull, which is a kind of a catamaran type boat that's going to come out, and we're going to, for the first time, marry up a mobile inshore undersea warfare unit van. We're going to put that on top of the slice boat and put that out to sea with some communications intercept equipment to hope to counter the asymmetric threat. And we also have a Sea Shadow out, which is a stealth craft, and we're going to use that as part of the opposition force to evaluate our ability to conduct this type of warfare in the urban environment. I would also point out to you that we have, courtesy of the U.S. Air Force, J-STARS. They're going to come out and help provide part of that overall battle space awareness, common tactical, common operational picture. So that's really where we're going and why we're doing it. The experimentation is key to getting to the future. It's essential that we break a few eggs and we're going to make an omelet. There are obvious hard things to be done here, but this really is a powerful tool to be able to best utilize our forces in defense of the country and in defense of our allies. Questions?
What's the timing of you're going to run in parallel with the
We're going to
Urban
run
Warrior?
right. We're going to run in parallel with Urban Warrior. To step you through it, the ships will bring the Marines up to the San Francisco Bay Area, and they will begin Urban Warrior. And while they're doing that, we have some modeling and simulation that will occur off of the coast, while providing a common tactical picture, linking with them. From there, we will then move into the bay, and we will conduct our asymmetric piece in San Francisco Bay with ships at anchor and with ships moored at the pier. We'll fuse our radars with the FAA radar so that we can get complete patterning of the battle space. We'll also bring in a vessel tracking system. So this really is an attempt not just to use military, but also to get the civilian side of this involved, because you could see a scenario, or you could imagine a scenario where you were in some major city overseas that has these capabilities, but left untapped. It's like fighting with one eye covered. You can enhance your ability to fight by tapping into these things, and we think this is going to be done quite successfully. We've already kind of looked at this, and all the technicians have bumped heads and talked, and the trons will flow. So that it's the conceptual piece now of the command and control there, and being able to pick out the good guys from the bad guys. But yes, these two will run in concert, in parallel.
How are you going to run media access?
There's a joint information center that's set up. There's a JVB that will be set up in the Oakland, Alameda area, manned by PAO representatives of both the Marine Corps and the Navy.
Put this in a context. Is this the first time the Navy's linked up with the FAA, for example, in such an exercise?
This is the first time that we've done this FAA vessel tracking system merge, and it really is, I think, a good concept that we will continue to try to practice. For the most part, what you will normally see is that you've got the two separate radar systems, and you're talking back and forth to ensure that you have deconfliction, and that civilian flights and military flights aren't interfering with one another. Well, if everybody, the controllers at the air tower as well as the controllers on the ship, are all looking at the same picture, and they all see, everything that's out there, just in terms of safety alone, it's enhanced.
You're talking about ship tracking. Normally, that's the Coast Guard has their ship
right.
control.
The Coast Guard at Yerba Buena Island in San Francisco mans the vessel tracking system, and they're going to merge their radar picture with ours from the ships as well, so that we can get a better feel of what is happening, a better awareness of what is happening in the bay, which ships are already identified by the Coast Guard, which ships aren't, small craft, so that, again, we have a better chance of being able to pick out somebody who might have ill intent from the common everyday boater.
We have trouble with data linking our own vessels together. Have we experimented, linking the FAA and the Coast Guard and these other people?
Well, yes, we have. We have done some brief experiments there, and that's why we're going up there, is to push the envelope as far as we can. I really didn't get into it, but part of one of the adjunct experiments is information superiority and information assurance. And several of the systems that we're taking up there to test are those very sorts of systems that are designed to measure bandwidth and to determine whether you can push large data through various communications links successfully, and whether you're using those bandwidths optimally.
About the ASW piece. I know the Navy is going to multi-static active approaches. Can you talk to, I know it's a sensitive area, but can you talk to any of the systems that you're going to look at?
Well, certainly. We're looking at a combination of various systems, both multi-static, of distributed arrays, of ship sonar, submarine sonar, obviously using aviation-based sensors, any national and theater sensors that might be available, really to try to get as much coverage of the battle space and of the undersea battle spaces as possible. There are a couple of other systems we're looking at, you know, some blue-green lasers and things of that nature. We'll see how it turns out. There are some real strong possibilities, both in the acoustic and the non-acoustic sense, and we're going to press that as hard as possible. SEALs will be our OPFOR in San Francisco. They'll also do some activities in the later parts of Colonel Blitz as well. We've got EOD who are coming to play the combat swimmer role. We were not allowed to use it's a swimmer detection system, and it insonifies the water, and we can't use that in San Francisco Bay because of environmental concerns. So we'll simulate that, but they will provide opposition force in that role as well. Yeah, so just about everybody out there who can play is playing. This is the CNO's put a lot of emphasis on this. This is a big deal for us. We're really trying to push the envelope and get to where we need to be.
Your list of participants, you've got the command ship, DG, cruiser, two LHDs. It looks like a FIG, I guess. Are they all going to be playing at the same time?
In some cases, yes. It's going to be very busy. We're not going to bring all of these into San Francisco Bay, and some of them will play at different times, but we'll have 6 ships in San Francisco Bay, plus some of the smaller units and craft.
Thank you, Bruce.
Well,